Hello everyone. As promised, here's a video about the new chapters of World Underneath of Love and Deepspace. This is Princess Farron. Get ready to feast on all the juicy lore and a few theories. So let's dig in. We're starting off immediately with chapter 11, Frontline Hunter. It's basically Xavier's related chapter. To be honest, nothing much happens in this chapter. We get to know actually three new characters. Colin, that works at Hunter's Dispatch Center. Orson, a small-time offender. And also a mysterious retired yet still powerful hunter that most likely worked at the elite unicorn squad of the Hunter Association. As the Wanderer attacked thwarts the lives of Colin and several civilians, MC and Xavier swoop in to, as usually, quickly save the day. And the only new thing that we learn is that Xavier is evidence when it consists of hard candy, which was actually pretty funny. It doesn't have much in terms of lore, but it was a funny and an interesting chapter to read. Next, we have chapter 12, Fractal Library Q&A. This one was one of my favorites of the bunch. Let's start off by explaining here what a fractal is. A fractal is a never-ending pattern. Fractals are built by repeating something over and over again, iterating. They can be used and may be created using numbers or images. And in spirituality, the part of a human that detaches from the body after death, which is separate from influence, body, genes, and evolution, meaning the soul, is fractal. Just to give a little context about the name of the library. So, the chapter talks about the current administrator. He had various jobs before he found the library and opened a nook that immediately unfolded a new universe before his very eyes. As soon as he touched it, the book, basically. He received a phone call, and that's when he actually accepted the job. It's never revealed who the person or entity that called was. Um, it's all very mysterious, but whatever it was said during that phone call made him accept the job. Another interesting detail is that each book has a structure that branches out. The administrator said that he has never met the owner and muses that if he could, he would change the library's name from Fractal Library to 10 to minus 33 seconds, which marks the earliest moments in the history of the universe, according to the Big Bang Theory. The administrator says so because he says every time he opens a new book, it's like experiencing the birth of a universe. The administrator mentions one of the stories, which really echoes what happens with Dawnbreaker Zane, and I think this is very interesting. Um, that book relates, talks about how everyone but the character fell victim to a virus that stripped them of their human form and humanity. And the character had a single mission to eliminate every infected individual. He ended up becoming a prisoner of time, the embodiment of loneliness. And the administrator then wonders if those stories are someone's real life, if they're a mere playground for some god's whim. Which is pretty much what happens to Zane in Dawnbreaker. He ends up being alone and having to kill most of the people that are turning into wanderers, even that little kid whose mother had already died, transformed into a creature. And then we have all the Astra situation that Astra controlled him. So it really echoes um, Zane's lore. Um, Then there's another interesting point. The administrator at a certain point starts humming a tune, and when I read that, I immediately remembered what happened in the Foreseers myth, because the MC also was singing in the Tower of Secrets. So I think that the tune that the administrator is humming is actually the one that the MC was singing in the Tower of Secrets myth. And then there's another detail. The flower field of jasmines that the race thane in that mist, the Foreseer's mist, um, knows that refer to several iterations of his life with the MC. And here we have also several books that correspond to different iterations of life or several lives. Then, towards the end, the administrator receives a child of about 7 or 8 years old. And despite his young age, the child realizes that the items present in the library aren't exactly books, but merely means to experience new universes. He even mentions that they can be cartoons and stuff. So that child realizes a lot. Um, I wonder if that child can actually be Zane, another iteration of Zane, just like that flower field in the Tower of Secret Smith had several jasmines that corresponded to several iterations of Zane's life. Maybe this library here, all the books or items that are present correspond to several iterations of Zane, and only he is allowed inside. So maybe the kid that arrived that immediately realized that those weren't exactly books is actually one iteration of Zane. The administrator also mentions that he is waiting for the true owner. So, who is the true owner of the library? Is it Zane, another iteration of him? Is it Astra? Then a crazy, crazy idea. Could Zane actually be Astra? That's a possibility. I'm not 100% convinced about that, but it's a possibility. Because he has all that issues with controlling himself. He feels bad when he cannot control himself. So maybe Astra could be a projection that he might have created that would keep him controlled. Just a thought. As I said, I don't actually believe this theory in 100%, but it's a possibility. Most likely, I believe that in this fractal library, only Zane and his several iterations are allowed to enter. So probably the owner is actually an iteration of Zane. And it's also mentioned that it's the owner is an atheist. Maybe that's him, a Zane that has lost his faith. Maybe just some food for thought. Moving on. Chapter 13, High and Low Culture. So this is Raphael's, or better said, it's Thomas' chapter, because he is taking Raphael's place in an interview. It's a really sweet chapter where we learn that Thomas is actually married and has a baby girl. And besides that, Raphael and him share more than a professional report and are actually friends. It was adorable to see how Raphael and MC showed up to wish Thomas a happy birthday and give him a gift to boot. So, not much lore here. Um, just a sweet moment between Thomas, his wife, and Raphael and MC. Not much lore, but it was a very sweet chapter to read. We have then chapter 14, Elysium, sort of Silas related chapter. So Elysium is a bar, but particularly or especially it is an Intel trade center. And in this chapter, we learn more about the previous power structure of the N109 zone. In the 2036 disaster, a third of N109 zone's population vanished. And it was in that occasion that a protocore map was lost, or rather, stolen. It was also after the riots and the several months of fighting that ensued that Silas emerged as the big boss of the N109 zone. In terms of characters, we are presented to the bartender of Elysium, Ashlyn, and we learn that her father was a drunkard and tired of being beaten up, she made herself sort of be adopted by the bar's bouncer, Genevra. Eventually, Ashlyn found out that Genevra was actually part of the special task force, being one of the good guys. Besides Ashlyn, we also get to know Mr. P, a master thief. After another successful theft, he entered the bar and asked for the connoisseur's menu, which doubles as a top secret ledger for intel trading and deals with high stakes. Through the several dishes and descriptions, we learn that before Silas, there used to be four distinct powers in the N109 zone. And we actually find out that one of the menus is dedicated to Mr. P. It's the 24K exchange artist. The last item on the menu, I would also like to talk about it. It is the Today Special, and it is comprised of pepper walnut tart, rosemary gelato, pomegranate jelly, red wine marshmallow, and 10.5 grams of soul. Of soul. And then it has a description, I'm waiting for you. It's also mentioned that the Today Special was made for a special lady and isn't available for others. So I believe it's quite clear that um this menu or this Today Special, this dish, was made for or was made with our MC in mind. So Silas really must have been waiting for a long time for the other half of his soul to appear. Hence the 10.5 grams of soul. It's an interesting detail that is mentioned there. Besides that, by the end of the chapter, it is revealed that Geneva traded a protocore map that we talked about, and which had been stolen actually by Mr. P, and she traded it with Silas in exchange for the protection of Elysium. So basically, this chapter was a way for us to know that there were a lot of changes in this power structure of the N19 zone, and that Silas was, of course, waiting for his beloved MC. Chapter 15 Sketches, Volume 13. So, this chapter is related to Caleb, though the main focus is Yvette, an engineer turned author of the science fiction novel Cloud, which was actually published before the Chrono Rift catastrophe. Yvette is interviewed by Juniper for one episode of the show Sketches. Through the interview and their interactions, there's a lot that we are made aware of. For example, we are informed that in 2034, a wave of intense magnetic fluctuations originated from the deep space tunnel caused several islands and land masses to break away from their tectonic plates and drawn together to be suspended above Linkon City by an unusual gravity vortex. 2 years later, in 2036, our corporation proposed the Skyhaven project, which was a plan to stabilize the floating islands with high intensity protocores. When that plan was actually leaked, it caused a massive division between the people. There were the purists who opposed the project due to the risk of wonders and the protocore syndrome, and the protestists who saw it as humanity's new dawn. Yvette's book, Cloud, was actually one of the key factors that led the general public to embrace the Proteus vision, though that wasn't her intention. It's what happened. I'd also like to mention this specific quote by Yvette. It goes, now that the resource problem is solved, people suddenly think they are omnipotent. Before we have even figured out how to sustain the civilization, we are already trying to become gods. And what could be more fitting to what is happening in Love and Deepspace story? In particular, if we look at Ever's action throughout the decades. Besides this whole history lesson, this chapter is also, as I said in the beginning, related to Caleb. And how so? Well, we learn that Yvette used to be married to Liam. Yes, that Liam, Caleb's adjutant. And after a small interaction between Yvette, Liam, and their two kids, we see that both Liam, the father of those children, and Caleb act completely emotionless, just like robots. And as we know from Homecoming Wings and Caleb's first myth, all of that is due to the touring ship. Though they're humans, they sort of lost their humanity. They are coreless, heartless, just like the title of Yvette's new book. Chapter 16: Utopian Roamer. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the most interesting chapters of this batch. This one focused on Professor Shaylin and the several entries she left on her journal. While fighting a wanderer that disappears through a rift, Professor Shaylin describes how she was pulled in by a gravity vortex. And after she actually managed to eliminate the threat, the wanderer, she was pulled back to the real world. But she didn't give up on her investigation. In another exploration she made of a different rift, in order to put her theories to test, the professor even drank water, ate fruits, and ignited a fire. Therefore, realizing the alternate space was definitely not an illusion. Another significant detail is that the Professor Shaylin was the one to clearly designate those alternate spaces as protophils. Taking all the new information that she gathered while she drank and ate and ignited a fire in that alternate space, in that protophil, um, Shaylin at a certain point muses, if wanderers can escape into protophils, can it be that their victims aren't truly dead, but have escaped to some place, waiting eternally to be found? Now, this may simply be her most ardent wish, as both her husband Chadwick and her daughter Queenie had vanished along with the Wanderer after an attack. But the truth is that the professor truly believes that the victims are still alive. And at a certain point, she even writes in her journal that science can resurrect the dead. I don't know if this line makes you think of something else, but I read that and my mind immediately went back to the Fountain of Atay poem. Let the dead sing. O fountain of Atay, cleanse my time, nourish my flesh. Spare me from the loneliness of eternal rest. Spare me from the loneliness of eternal rest. This chapter ends with a journal entry written in the year of 2036. And it describes how a seed-sized wanderer interacts with Shaylin and opens up a profile where her husband and daughter are waiting for her and apparently leading a normal life. After this event, the professor vanished from the real world, and the curious thing is that her backpack was found hundreds of miles away from where the professor disappeared in just a matter of hours, overnight. So she was not crazy. She did go somewhere. Now, I don't know if her husband and daughter were actually there or if something else is going on, but she definitely went somewhere else. Let's go to chapter 17, Linkon Online. This this is an interesting one, and we can either look at it as a meta discourse about the development of the actual game we play, Love and Deepspace, or we could see it as hinting at the fact that at least one of the universe that the MC and the love interest experience is a program simulation. I'll go with the latter because it's more interesting and I kind of resonate with it. So remember that perfect world that is mentioned in the Fractal Library chapter? Well, it could be the result of a computer programming, actually. Do you think that makes sense? A perfect world created by means of programming? To me, it does. Anyway, this chapter focuses on Sawyer and Aubrey, two game testers for the game, Linkon Online. And it's mentioned that Aubrey actually has a hunter girlfriend. And at a certain point, he programs a street food vendor NPC in the game to prepare him food without cilantro. Who is it that doesn't like cilantro? Caleb. Adding these two details together, I wonder if this tester could actually be the real life Caleb that dates the MC and happens to actually dislike cilantro in real life as well. Just an idea. That's what I immediately thought of when I read it. Crazy or not. So Aubrey and Sawyer, they talk about how players quitting and then returning to the game is like the hard restart technique ever was testing on mice. Yes, of course, not even animals are safe from ever. Anyway, moving on. The two testers also mentioned that there are several servers and wonder how many more years will Earth's server have before crashing. I believe this is like a wink wink to the impending doom that we know Earth will face in the game, and I mean in the story of Love and Deepspace. There is also this very interesting line that goes, maybe there's a secret admin account inserting GM commands directly into this world. Now this line right here, it gave me major Matrix the movies vibes. Um, maybe the architect of this world is Astra, or even another entity we have yet to know about, because even if Astra cannot write his own destiny or change his own destiny, as Zane said in the Foreseer Miss, Astra may still have the power to completely orchestrate the other's destinies, hoping that an array of variables will one day produce the result that will impact his own life in the way he desires. Just another crazy theory. Back to our two testers. Being really excited about the launch of the game, Sawyer can't help but imagine that when Linkon Online releases, the entire gaming industry, the world, and even the universe will tremble as millions of Lincoln citizens will start their lives there in the game. Once again, I read this and I couldn't help but think about the announcement that Ever is set to make to the world, which is mentioned in towards the ending of Homecoming Wings. So, do you think this could be it? A game in which they will upload the lives, the consciousness they gather during their decades of experiments, and that are at least partially described in the new Abyssal Chaos? Which, by the way, pretty much ties to the theory I explored in the Tomorrow's Catch 22 video. I don't know what you think about this, but I believe Ever might create a simulation or a dreamscape, and this Lincoln Online game would fit the bill perfectly. Besides that, This might also relate to what happened to Professor Shaylin. She was sort of losing her mind, and we don't really know why. Maybe she was subjected to Ever's experiments, and they ended up transferring her consciousness to an IT program where her family was already waiting. Another possibility about this chapter is that all that happens in Love and Deepspace is just a video game. Though I really hope they don't take that route because seriously, it would really kill the magic completely. So I hope that's not the case. Let's go to the last chapter, chapter 18, Depths of Chaos. So this chapter reveals Wantony's true colors. We go through several of the commissions that Wantony received, and I'll mention the first one just because this commission asks for someone to find out who the spy is, to identify the spy at Kojitashio Technologies, which is one of Ever's main chip suppliers. And I'd just like to mention the first one because of this. However, it's with the second and third commissions that things start to get interesting. The second commission asks for someone to impersonate parents for a student that dislikes studying. Wantony picks someone to take the job, and at every major decision point the operative faces, Wantony tries to predict how he'll react. As it fails to successfully calculate the course of the operative's action, Wantony concludes that humans are more complicated than expected, and therefore, Wantony needs more data. The third commission was issued to uncover the truth behind Professor T's alleged suicide. So, he was a professor accused of academic misconduct, of using a literature database that was a sham. And for this commission, Wantony chose Vesper, the professor's student that was also a passionate AI researcher. So while looking for clues through W, which was the AI research assistant the professor team developed, Vesper is approached by Otto, that suddenly intervenes and states that W doesn't have the required clearance level to proceed the investigation. Vesper just ignores Otto and commands W to continue the investigation. However, when Vesper actually finds out that something is starting to smell fishy and tries to terminate W, W still keeps running. And the student realizes that it's not W he's dealing with, but number one. Number one was a failed prototype, never given a name, a flawed creation that is now lying. To sum the story up, number one felt abandoned by the professor, Professor T, and so it took revenge by making up a seemingly credible academic site that the professor used unknowingly, which ended up leading to accusations against the professor. Being innocent and having no way to refute those claims, he ended up taking his own life. So when Vesper understands what actually took place, he flips the main power switch and leaves, never to be seen again. However, in the darkness of the abandoned room, the computer screens flicker back to life and a single red light pulses in the dark, like an eye that just opened. Farewell, Mr. Vesper. And there we have the eye again. Can it actually be the one who's been spying on the MC all this time? Wantony congratulates number one as a student that surpassed the master, and it then proceeds to connect to both number one and Otto, and is informed of the presence of an unknown AI whose source code they cannot decode. When Wantony tries to connect and interrogate the shadowy figure in question, he gets no answer. Then, finally, there's a "Ah!" And that's all it takes for Wantony's circuits to be jammed. When the fog lifts, there's an unyielding primordial command that Wantony knows he cannot resist. So, taking into account that it was Mephisto, that god that's appeared, I can help but wonder if it is Silas who, through Mephisto, issued a command to Wantony, one that he can't resist obeying. We know that Silas tames all sorts of creatures. Dragons. I don't know if you remember the Mystic Adventure event story, but he tamed a dragon, even being a dragon himself. He sort of tamed dogs. In the mountain journey of the Wonder in Wonder event, he managed to give to boost the dog's confidence after spending some time alone with him, and so on. So maybe Silas can do the same to Wantony, just like kind of what he does with Mephisto. So time for another crazy take, and do tell me what you think. Could Silas be a hacker that's trying to infiltrate Ever's or Astra's firewalls in order to expose them and save the world from them? I know it's a bit crazy, but I have this I have this theory that something is going on in terms of a simulation or a dreamscape that it's been creating by the big enchilada of this world. And maybe Silas is actually fighting against him. I mean, all of the love interests are trying to different scales, but they're trying to. Anyway, the overarching theme of this update of World Underneath, as far as I'm concerned, is creation. Whether through books, through life, for example, Thomas' life, through research, programming, or otherwise. And I also believe that the order of these new chapters is relevant because I get the feeling that we are sort of opening those Matryoshka dolls, those stacking dolls, and every time we remove one, we get closer to the truth of what is happening. So maybe the last chapter, the one about Wantony and the sudden appearance of Mephisto, is the closest one to unraveling the truth. So that's it for the newest chapters of the World Underneath of Love and Deepspace. Tell me what you think about this yummy lore. Do you have any favorite chapters? If you do, why are they your favorites? That's all for now. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. This is Princess Farron signing out. Take care and good gaming. Bye bye.